Another charity case. Cousin Peter's voice dripped with disdain as he studied the funding request from the local youth center. Really, Catherine? When are you going to stop playing small-town social worker and do something meaningful with your life? I bit back a sharp reply, reminding myself why I'd invited my wealthy cousins to my modest home in Cedar Grove, population 12,000. After inheriting $2.5 million from my grandmother 6 months ago, I needed investment advice. Unfortunately, the only financially savvy relatives I had were also the most condescending. The youth center provides essential services, I said, keeping my voice level. But that's not why I asked you here. I want to discuss investment opportunities for Grandma Rose's inheritance. Peter and his wife Victoria exchanged knowing looks. Even my other cousin, Andrea, stopped scrolling through her phone long enough to pay attention. Finally, Victoria smiled, perfect teeth gleaming. We were wondering when you'd wise up. I mean, what were you going to do with all that money in this? She glanced around my comfortable but simple living room, charming little town. At 34, I'd spent the last decade building a life I was proud of. After getting my master's in social work, I'd returned to Cedar Grove, working my way up to Director of Community Services. It wasn't glamorous like Peter's investment banking career or Andrea's luxury real estate business in Chicago. But it mattered. The youth center needs $50,000 for their new education program, I explained. I was thinking of donating that much, then investing the rest. Absolutely not. Peter cut me off. This is exactly why you need our help. You can't waste Grandma's money on local charity cases when there are real opportunities out there. Victoria nodded enthusiastically. Peter's new investment fund is generating amazing returns. 20% minimum, guaranteed. That caught my attention. Guaranteed. How? Peter launched into a complex explanation about market algorithms, proprietary trading strategies, and exclusive client pools. Most of it went over my head, but the projected returns were impressive. We've got several family members invested already, Andrea chimed in. Aunt Susan put in $500,000 last month. Even Dad's moved his retirement fund over. I hesitated. Could I see some documentation? Prospectus, performance records? Catherine, Peter sighed dramatically. This is family. Do you really need paperwork? The minimum buy-in is usually $5 million, but I can get you in with $2 million because you're my favorite cousin. That should have been my first warning sign. But Peter had always been the financial genius of the family, following in our uncle's footsteps to Wall Street success. And if Aunt Susan and Uncle James trusted him, guilt triumphed over caution. 2 weeks later, I transferred $2 million to Peter's investment fund, keeping the remaining amount for local projects and emergency savings. The first 3 months seemed to confirm Peter's promises. The monthly statements showed steady gains. Victoria called regularly with updates about their luxurious lifestyle. New vacation home in Aspen, private school for their kids, country club memberships. You could have all this too, she hinted. There's no reason to stay stuck in Cedar Grove. With your returns, you could easily afford a place in Chicago near us. But I loved my life in Cedar Grove. The people were real, the work meaningful. When the youth center launched their education program with my donation, seeing the kids' excitement meant more than any country club membership. Then came the call that changed everything. Catherine. Lisa's voice was urgent. Remember that background check you asked me to run on Peter's fund? I just heard from my contact at the SEC. There's no registration for this fund. Nothing. Are you sure about where your money is? My blood ran cold. What are you saying? I'll think about it, I said carefully. Don't think too long, Victoria warned. This opportunity won't last forever. And honestly, what else are you going to do with the money here? Fund more hopeless causes? After they left, I sat in my garden, thinking. The youth center desperately needed that education program. But if Peter's fund could really generate those returns, I could help even more people in the long run. I called my old college roommate, Lisa, now a financial advisor in Seattle. 20% guaranteed returns? She sounded skeptical. Kat, that's not how legitimate investments work. Has he registered this fund with the SEC? I assume so. The whole family's investing. Get me the paperwork, Lisa insisted. I'll review it for you, no charge. But when I asked Peter for documentation, he got defensive. This is exclusive, Catherine, by invitation only. If you don't trust family, I'm saying you need to get more information. Fast. This has all the red flags of a... Don't say it. I couldn't bear to hear the word Ponzi scheme out loud. But once the seed of doubt was planted, I couldn't ignore the signs. The vague explanations, the lack of documentation, the pressure to keep everything in the family. I hired a forensic accountant sworn to secrecy. Within 2 weeks, he confirmed my worst fears. The fund exists, he reported grimly, but it's not generating any real returns. Money from new investors is being used to pay earlier investors, classic pyramid structure, and there are some very questionable transfers to offshore accounts. I felt sick, not just for myself, but for Aunt Susan, Uncle James, all the family members Peter had convinced to invest. Then came the second shock. My accountant discovered something else. Systematic embezzlement from the family's charitable foundation, which Peter managed. Money meant for scholarships and community programs had been flowing into his personal accounts for years. I confronted him at his Chicago office, armed with proof. "It's not what you think," he blustered. "The market's been challenging. We're just having a temporary cash flow issue. Save it." I slid the forensic report across his desk. "I've seen the evidence. The fake returns, the offshore accounts, the foundation theft. How long did you think you could keep this up?" His face changed, arrogance replacing panic. "And what are you going to do about it? Go public? Destroy the family's reputation? Think about Aunt Susan's social standing, Uncle James's position on the hospital board. I think you should be more worried about your position in federal prison." "Don't threaten me," he snapped. "You're still the same small-town nobody who needed my help. Nobody will believe you over me." I stood to leave. "We'll see about that." Oh, and Peter. I kept records of everything. Every conversation, every promise, every transfer. Consider this your warning. Walking out of his gleaming office tower, I felt strangely calm. The money hurt to lose, but this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about justice, about protecting others from Peter's greed. "What are you going to do?" Lisa asked when I called to update her. "First, I'm going to save as many people as I can. Then," I smiled grimly, "then I'm going to show my cousin exactly what this small-town nobody can do." The game was on, and Peter was about to learn that real power isn't about money or status. It's about doing what's right, no matter the cost. A family meeting. Victoria's voice dripped skepticism over the phone. "Catherine, darling, we're all terribly busy with the Meridian Club charity gala this weekend. Trust me," I cut in. "Everyone will want to be there, especially Peter. Tell him it's about additional investments that got our attention." Peter's fund was always hungry for new money, needing fresh capital to maintain the illusion of profits. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the last month preparing for this moment. The meeting was set for Saturday afternoon at Uncle James' lakeside mansion. I arrived early, setting up my laptop and documents in his wood-paneled study. Lisa, my financial advisor friend, came as my expert witness. The forensic accountant waited on standby for a video call. "Are you sure about this?" Lisa asked, reviewing our presentation one last time. "Once you start, there's no going back." I thought about the youth center kids whose scholarship fund Peter had stolen, about Aunt Susan's retirement savings, about all the lives his greed had touched. I'm sure. They arrived in waves. Peter and Victoria in matching tennis whites, Andrea glued to her phone. Uncle James and Aunt Susan looking country club perfect. Cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone who'd invested in Peter's exclusive fund. "Catherine." Peter's smile was razor sharp. "Victoria mentioned you're interested in increasing your investment. Wise choice. Our latest returns are exceptional." "Actually," I interrupted, closing the study door, "I called everyone here to discuss those returns. And a few other things." The next hour was like watching a bomb detonate in slow motion. I presented the evidence methodically: fake account statements, non-existent trades, the pyramid structure of payments. Lisa explained the technical details while I showed the money trail. "This is ridiculous," Peter sputtered. "These accusations are documented." I pulled up the forensic accountant's report, including the theft from the family foundation. "Did you really think nobody would notice the scholarship fund being drained?" Aunt Susan gasped. "The children's scholarships. Peter, you promised those were safe." "It's a temporary reallocation," he insisted. "The market conditions." "Stop lying." My voice cut through his excuses. I've already reported everything to the SEC. They're launching a formal investigation on Monday. The room erupted in chaos. Victoria burst into tears, clinging to Peter's arm. Andrea dropped her phone. Uncle James looked like he might have a heart attack. You can't do this, Peter hissed. You'll destroy everything. You destroyed everything, I corrected him. I'm trying to save what I can. I laid out the recovery plan I developed with Lisa and a team of lawyers. Those who'd received profits would need to return them as fraudulent transfers. But if everyone cooperated with the investigation, there was a chance to recover some of the principal investments. I've set up a legitimate victims fund, I explained. We'll pool resources for legal representation, work with the authorities. Authorities? Victoria shrieked. Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation, our social standing? I thought of all the times they'd mocked my little town, my meaningless work helping others. Your reputation? I laughed softly. You're worried about country club gossip while people's life savings vanish, while scholarship kids lose their chance at college? Speaking of the foundation, Lisa interjected smoothly, we have documentation of every unauthorized transfer. The board will need to be notified. Wait. Uncle James stood up, his face ashen. There must be a way to handle this internally, keep it in the family, like Peter kept his promises in the family. I shook my head. No, too many people have been hurt. The truth comes out on Monday. Peter switched tactics, his voice turning pleading. Catherine, please, we can work something out. I'll get you your money back with interest. Just don't what? Don't expose your crimes. Don't stop you from stealing from more people. I stood facing my cousin directly. You know what your biggest mistake was, Peter? Besides the fraud, the theft, the lies? He stared at me, waiting. You thought because I chose to live in a small town, because I work helping others instead of chasing wealth, that I was stupid, weak, someone you could easily deceive. I never. You forgot that Grandma Rose taught me the same values she taught you. The difference is I actually listened. The next few hours were a blur of tears, recriminations, and negotiations. Some family members agreed to cooperate immediately, desperate to salvage what they could. Others, like Victoria, alternated between threats and hysterical pleas. But by evening, the die was cast. The SEC would receive our evidence first thing Monday. The foundation board would be notified. Law enforcement would handle the criminal aspects. Peter and Victoria disappeared before dinner, already calling their lawyers. Andrea sat in shocked silence, her social media empire about to implode. Uncle James and Aunt Susan huddled with Lisa, discussing damage control. I slipped out to the lakeside deck, exhausted but at peace. My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Henderson at the youth center, with a photo of kids in the new computer lab my donation had helped create. You did the right thing, Lisa said, joining me outside. It won't be easy, but you saved a lot of people from losing everything. Not everyone. I sighed, thinking of the later investors who lose most of their money. But you stopped it before it got worse, and the foundation funds can be recovered. The scholarship program saved. The fallout was exactly as expected. Peter and Victoria fled to the Cayman Islands, but Interpol caught up with them within weeks. The SEC investigation made headlines. Our family's social standing took a massive hit. But something unexpected happened too. As news of the fraud spread, people started reaching out. Other victims of similar schemes, kids who'd lost scholarships, families devastated by financial predators. 6 months later, I stood before a different kind of gathering. The youth center's main hall was packed with people attending the first meeting of the Financial Fraud Survivors Support Group. We'd expanded the education program to include financial literacy classes, fraud prevention workshops, and counseling services. Sometimes, I told the group, the worst things that happen to us lead to the best ways we can help others. Uncle James and Aunt Susan sat in the back row. They'd lost millions but gained perspective. They now volunteered teaching seniors how to spot investment scams. The family foundation, under new management, was thriving. We'd restored the scholarship program and added grants for fraud prevention education. Lisa called one evening as I was leaving work. You know what's ironic? Your Little Town project has helped more people than Peter's fund ever did, even if he hadn't been stealing. I looked around at my not-so-small town, at the lives touched and changed, at the community grown stronger through adversity. Money's funny that way, I replied. Its real value isn't in how much you have, but in what you do with it. A year to the day after the family meeting, I received a letter from Peter, written from federal prison. He asked for forgiveness, for help, for money for his appeal. I wrote back one sentence. The youth center always welcomes volunteers after rehabilitation. He never replied, but I heard through family that he'd started teaching financial literacy to fellow inmates. Maybe something good could come from him too. Standing in my garden that evening, I thought about Grandma Rose. She'd left me more than money. She left me her values, her strength, her sense of right and wrong. The inheritance that mattered most wasn't in her bank accounts, but in her lessons about integrity and community. The next morning, I had grant proposals to review, support group meetings to lead, and a new financial education initiative to launch. My life wasn't small. It was rich with purpose, with real connections, with meaningful work. And that, I realized, was the best revenge of all.